Hello and welcome to the Vino Karma Project. My name is Amanda Layden. I am here today with two amazing women, Bridget and Julie, whom I'll introduce in a minute, who have served up the podcast. Bridget Albert is the National Director of Education at Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits and co-host of Served Up the podcast. She has over 25 years of industry experience and the book, Market Fresh Mixology. She is passionate and creative and is able to leverage her relationships with national account executives and celebrated beverage professionals globally. Julie Milroy, VP on-premise at Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits, is also the co-host of Served Up the podcast. Julie has over 15 years of experience in the beverage alcohol industry. Her diverse background from sales, HR, marketing, and commercial strategy has given her the skills to make positive impact and create results that are always customer-centric. Welcome to Vino Karma, Julie and Bridget. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yay, I'm so excited to dig into this conversation. You two are doing amazing things with your podcast. So for people who don't know you, can you share a little bit of the impetus behind developing Served Up the podcast?
Do you want to start, Bridget?
Sure, I can start. Served Up really was, is definitely a passion project for both Julie and I. And we started thinking about this right before COVID hit, to create a resource for the beverage trade that really encompasses not only social justice leaders, but also folks that are just doing some really amazing things in our industry, but don't always get the mic passed to them. And so once COVID hit, we saw the importance of having this resource available to everyone, a free resource that's available on Apple, on Spotify, on Google, where we could record with these amazing industry professionals and beyond and hear their stories, and in hopes to really inspire others to do better, to be better, to learn something new, and to pass that information on. And so, Served Up is definitely a labor of love. And we are so excited each and every week when we get to speak to these unique individuals and hear all about their journey and what they've done, to help others throughout their career and life.
Oh, I love that so much. It almost gives me chills thinking about it because I think this work is so important and so needed, even though it's 2021, the work still has to happen, and elevating underrepresented voices and telling people's stories is so key. So Julie, I'm going to turn to you for a second. So you launched the podcast. Was it in October of 2020?
Yes, it was in October.
And in a short space of time, you gathered a pretty big following. So what do you think it was that started resonating with people inside the industry and outside that amassed such a large following in a short space of time?
Well, I think COVID was such a challenging time. It's still a challenging time for many of us. And I think the podcast, everything that Bridget mentioned, which, really brought Served Up to life, is really what people wanted and were looking for, right? They want to hear within the hospitality industry, it is very broad. I mean, there's so many segments within the hospitality industry, and we were hit the hardest during COVID. And I think everybody just kind of wanted to unite and to be able to have a platform that they can hear from people that have similar stories to them and that might look like them and have similar experiences. And I think people really gravitated towards that. We have a mix of celebrated industry experts like a Tony Abganam or Dale DeGraff. And then we've got trailblazers like Samara Davis and Josh Davis that have really paved the way for Black bartenders and even Black consumers, right, with the Bourbon Society. And then we've got like the dean of FIU Hospitality School of Chaplain, Dean Michael Chang. And so we're hitting all these different audiences within the hospitality. And that was really our goal, is to say, we're all one industry. We are the second largest employer in the country. We should unite and work together. So I think that's been our success, is we're hitting so many different people with it, so many different groups within the industry.
I love your vision, both of you, in terms of allowing all sides of the industry to shine and having people understand that this is a massive industry and there are a lot of different aspects to it. And, we don't often get to see what goes on behind the scenes. So kudos to the two of you for creating this, which definitely is much needed. So at this point in time, you've now had conversations with a lot of different people. Your podcast comes out every Monday. Are there lessons you've learned or shifts in perspectives or ahas that each of you have had throughout these conversations?
I would like to share one, and it really was when we interviewed Garrett Oliver. Garrett Oliver is the master brewer and owner of the Brooklyn Brewery Company. He also created and leads and does amazing work for the Michael James Jackson Foundation. Not the singer, but the very famous and celebrated, I have to say it, but the very famous and celebrated whiskey writer. And one of the things that Garrett had said in the podcast, which was become a very impactful moment in my life immediately, was, Garrett is a Black man. And he had said in all of his years that he has been brewing, that he's never had a Black person come in to apply, to either to assist him or to work in his brewery.
Wow.
And so he said, I recognize this and realize that I need to create the space. And so this really resonated, the lesson, in a big way, that somebody that is incredibly successful, he's worldwide. People know him. He literally wrote the Oxford book on beer. And, to hear him very humbly say, even with all my success and with all my connections, I realize that this is bigger than me. And I'm going to use the rest of the time on this planet to create a space for those that look like me. And I thought, all of us that have privilege in any sort of way in our life, what a great statement to say, where we can take a minute to see what spaces that we should be opening and what spaces should we be creating inclusion. And it was a big wake-up call.
Wow. Yeah, that is extremely powerful. It also makes me think, just like each of us can take responsibility for what we can do for others to pave the way. And Bridget, I really appreciate you pointing out the piece around privilege, because it is so true, especially, you and I being white women, we have a certain element of privilege and a platform that we can leverage, and also to help become allies for people of color to be able to create the space for them to come forward. That is really powerful. Julie, what about you? Is there anything that stands out to you over these past few months that you'd like to share?
Yes, we just love interviewing our guests because we get so inspired by all of them. But one that I am such a fangirl over, and Bridget's heard over and over again, she gets to hear when I get super excited, is a woman named Chanel Turner. And she is the owner and producer of Foudre Vodka. She is so inspirational because we get to really learn their stories, right? And understand, like, from childhood, what inspired them to get into this business. And somebody that grew up with a single mother that just gave her all the love and attention and support. She ended up being very successful throughout school, ended up getting a scholarship to a college, and then getting the scholarship withdrawn because something happened with the school, and then was able to pivot and go to another school and then be really, a badass at basketball and then getting another scholarship. I mean, like, how does that happen? You've got to be top of the top. And she is. And, not only was she able to kind of get that formal education, she recognized like, hey, I want a good vodka that I can drink and sip. And she created this amazing vodka. And it's not just another vodka, it's a very innovative vodka and the process and whatnot. And as she did it, she's a Black woman, lesbian woman, right, representing LGBTQ. And she recognized like, hey, there's all these other wine and spirits that are Black owned that I don't know anything about because we don't see them in the stores. We don't see them in the advertisements, right? So she ended up starting the Black owned wine and spirits festival out of Maryland. And we learned about her from an internal project that we had at Southern to really drive diversity and inclusion. So two of our colleagues, Tara Jones and Candace Stroud, they came up with the idea, and that's how we learned about Chanel. But it doesn't stop there. So she's got this amazing festival that she does because she's not only building her brand, she wants everybody else, the other Black community to also have that platform, right? So we talk about privilege. Privilege comes in many different ways, and we have that bit of privilege. It might not be as much as somebody else's privilege, but use that to help others. And, so not only did she start this festival to highlight those brands, she's also now started her own distribution company in Maryland. Right now, she's only in Maryland to bring some of these brands in and help them get distributed. And I am just amazed by the work she does. And I think she might not even be 40, or did she turn 40? I don't remember. And I know Bridget keeps telling me
I'm not 40 years old yet. I don't think she is. She is a young lady that is just crushing it.
Yeah. And I can't wait to see where she'll be next year, the year after, and years to come. So to me, that I'm just so inspired by her, and we could all use with a lot more Chanels in this world. So.
Yeah, that is super, super inspirational. I think I recently heard her speak at an event, and I also was like, wait, what? Like, this is incredible. And just using her platform to help other spirits and wine brands break into the industry was really, really inspiring. And I really appreciate you sharing that story. So let's talk a little bit about this pandemic that we are still in. How have you two personally been able to navigate this, as well as with your company and the brands that you represent?
Sure. I mean, I can definitely start on the education side. Really leveraging the hell out of Zoom right now. Anything that we can do that is virtual and live, where we actually have our cameras on and talk to other humans, has been key to really getting our brand messages out. Every Tuesday consistently throughout COVID and through this year as well, we do offer a virtual brand live class with the Beam Suntory brand ambassadors at noon on Zoom. And it's just been terrific to see the trade come out from all across the country. I always freak out like when someone tunes in at noon Central Time from Hawaii.
Yeah.
I'm like, girl, why aren't you asleep? What are you doing learning about bourbon this morning? It's recorded. Watch it again later. But I really, virtual is been our lifeline. And I feel that it's not going anywhere because, again, where else and how else so easily at no cost to anyone, right? Besides the company that's holding the Zoom, capabilities, can really tune in at the same time without getting on a plane, really without leaving their bed if they don't want to, leave your jammies on, whatever.
No, I think it's so important though, because, prior to Zoom, we all thought, or prior to the pandemic, before we were all on Zoom all day, every day, we all thought like, oh, well, you can't transfer knowledge in certain ways unless you're in a room together. Mm-hmm. And this pandemic has been like, no, all of the things you thought to be true are no longer true. And so, Julie, I'm going to turn to you for a second. Is there anything that you have noticed during this time? I think we've all shown some resiliency and also innovation. So anything that you've seen that kind of surprised you, or other brands or your brands that are looking at things saying, oh, we can innovate in this way, and still really provide value to everybody that you work with, to customers. What have you seen?
Yes, great question. And I love that question. So I started a new role right when the pandemic hit. And that was to oversee the on-premise, so all hotels and restaurants for the country, for the Beam Suntory portfolio. And it was, our business crashed, right? It went to rock bottom. And the way that we innovated, obviously, I need to prove myself. I need to let them know that they made the right decision and that I'm going to be able to do this. And I do feel like they needed me for this role in the pandemic. We quickly, with my Beam counterparts, immediately recognized that our restaurants, our only lifeline was going to be able to do to go, right? Mm-hmm. And normally you don't think of ordering a cocktail to go. By the way, it was illegal in almost every single state in the country.
Yeah.
And there were a couple counties, I think Texas did have it legal, but nobody thought of doing it. Just like we had Zoom, but nobody used Zoom. Like when we Zoomed, nobody put the camera on, God forbid, right? So it was, but the pandemic forced everybody, and people still wanted their cocktails. They still wanted the experience of their favorite restaurants at home. And so we quickly worked together and came up with like a cocktails to go strategy and playbook. And it was incredible to see that some of our markets and the amazing salespeople that we have that work for Beam Suntory and for Southern Glazers were quickly already working with their restaurants. What do you need? How can we help you? How can we support you? How can we get you branded point of sale items to help you? And it was, that piece was incredible because we really came up with an organized way to really support our sales teams and customers come up with a cocktail to go platform. And then with that came different strategies. Bridget was a big part of coming up with a draft cocktail strategy. So it's basically you create pre-made batched cocktails, amazing cocktails that you get in your favorite bars, and you get it out of like a beer draft. So when you've got like 12 beer drafts, you can have a couple like a Maker's Mark Gold Rush or a Knob Creek Manhattan, or a Hornitos Margarita, and just pull it right from the tap because now everybody's sensitive to low touch. So those are a couple examples that we had. And I think on another part, what we really saw were the brands coming up and really giving back and supporting our communities. What I love to see is what Maker's Mark did with Chef Lee, where they actually did like a takeover of empty restaurant spaces and turned them into, like rescue centers. So they had food, necessary supplies for anybody in the hospitality industry, because we know that there's so many people in the hospitality industry that have families that rely on that day-to-day cash that they make. So that to me was so innovative. I mean, if you would have asked me a couple years ago, could you imagine a brand coming in and taking over and being a service center for the community? I would never have imagined that. So that was really impressive. And I mean, I can go on and on. Our industry is so innovative. I think another piece is the platforms, right? The e-commerce platform at Southern, we launched SG Proof, and it's been a long process and that's our digital platform, our e-commerce platform. And it's taken a while to get our customers used to it. They're like, no, I want somebody to come in with their pad, and that's how I want to take their order, and that's how I used to. And then the pandemic hit and everybody's online signing up, I want my order. And that was incredible. But then also how our restaurants and hotels started using, the scan menus, right? The QR codes to take orders. And then you've got a company like Bebot that does, and they started prior to the pandemic, but they've just blown up, where you could literally scan your menu, put in your credit card, and order directly through your app, whether you're in the place or whether you want delivery. So I think there were a lot of things out there, but the pandemic really forced all this innovation to happen quickly. And because people are so agile and brilliant that make up this industry, they were able to just execute it and maximize whatever little opportunity there was.
I love all of those examples. And it just does go to show that we can innovate quicker than we ever thought possible. What do you think, the two of you, how do you think the hospitality industry will be changed forever as a result of what we've just been going through for the past year?
That's a big question.
Not to put you on the spot.
I'm hoping a few things that change and we never go back to, really. I think that, one of them is that as diverse as our industry is, it's not always the most inclusive. And so, with the civil unrest that we witnessed and went through and the shakeups over the past year, I do hope that something that changes is just really considering the people that work for you and speaking their language, right? I'm not talking about another language, but really to understand when you're working with someone maybe from the LGBTQ community, that you just want to make sure that you are sensitive to everyone's needs, right? As an employer, you really need to look at who your employees are and make sure you're using the right language with everyone. And to make sure that you're always, creating that welcoming, open space to have that diverse staff and interaction with your guests. I think it's really important to the vibe that you're creating and that inclusiveness, as well. That's one thing that I think hopefully we'll see better change, right? In bars, restaurants, and in hotels as well. Gosh, there's so much. I think another thing is with the health awareness. I think we're all like hyper aware now of our health. Now that so many places, like my small town in Shorewood, for instance, we have to wear a mask when we go out. You won't be allowed in the grocery store, in bars, restaurants, whatever. It's mandated. You have to wear one. And the hand sanitizer is everywhere, right? I don't know that that's going to go away anytime soon. But with that said, so many people that, and myself included, when I was working in a bar, we tend to sacrifice our health. When we have the flu or we're not feeling well, we still go in. And so many times our employers say, you're sick, too bad. I need you here. I need you to work double, So I'm really hoping that changes, where we feel empowered to say, no, don't feel well. I won't be in tonight, but I'll be back in when I'm okay. And that the employer's not going to push back on you, because there's just too many stories about restaurant workers that are on their feet all day long with a fever, not feeling well. This is pre-COVID and during COVID, because they're afraid that they're going to be fired because they're not sucking it up and doing their job.
Yeah, that's a big one. Julie, what about you? Is there anything that you can think of where you either can see the change happening or remaining, or you hope that there is change?
Well, of course I agree. And I think Bridget made the best points. I think when it comes to social issues, when it comes to diversity at not just the front line, but at the leadership level, right? It should, when we talk about reflecting our community, it should be at every level. So those things I think are happening. I think people are being more aware of that, right? Like who gets featured, who gets invited for the interview, that it's a representation of the community. I feel pretty confident that that's going to happen. I think, but when we talk about kind of the business aspect, I think outdoor dining will continue to be huge. I mean, I live in Miami and we're spoiled. So it's like, oh, if we don't have AC, we're sitting indoors. We're not going to sit outside. It's too hot, too many bugs. We have embraced sitting outside. I mean, it's been like flash flooding. We're under a canopy and we're still eating and drinking like it's nothing. I mean, places I have family in Alaska and I grew up in Alaska. So I was just there in January and we were sitting outside in these makeshift igloos and it was amazing. And I think COVID has taught me, like, I try to spend as much time outdoors because we're home so much. And it's such a beautiful thing to be able to eat outdoors and entertain outdoors, right? So I think that part won't go away. I think hotels are really embracing kind of that outdoor space as well, and more space, right? And not trying to cram everybody into small spaces. I think that will continue to be a thing. I think convenience will continue to be a thing, right? People want things quickly and they want it easily. So like the app that I mentioned, Bebot, right? I mean, I explained this to Bridget. Imagine like you're on vacation, you've been schlepping around all day, you're exhausted, you finally get to the hotel, you're with your family, you're in the lobby, you find the open table and you want drinks, but nobody wants to get up and have to go to the bar to go get the drink or hunt down the server because it's an odd time. You can literally go on the app, put in your order, and it can geo-target to exactly where you are, and boom, you've got your stuff. I mean, those are things that we never really thought about. No. And I think it's taking those inconveniences out of these experiences, right? And it's really just offering what people want. They still want that human connection. You still want somebody smiling, bringing your drink and asking you how you're doing and how everything's great. But all those little things that are just a nuisance, I think technology will allow us to take that out and bring the good stuff in.
That's great. Is there anything else that the two of you are excited about? Other trends you're seeing? Other things coming on the horizon for the hospitality and the beverage space?
You and your big questions. I love it.
That's why we're here. We want to hear your knowledge.
We're used to asking the questions, not having to answer them.
Your question is around trends. It's so hard to think about trends because we're just starting to open up again. But I do think that there's still a lot of excitement around cocktails to go. Like Julie mentioned, that's not going anywhere. That's another opportunity for our customers, for bars and restaurants to really expand their footprint, which I think is super great, super cool. I do see perhaps on the horizon more of those touchless options, because kind of going back to the whole health aspect now that we're all hyper aware. And I do hope we continue to wash our hands as much as we do. Like totally gross that we'd be told to do that.
I know, it's disgusting that people didn't wash their hands before.
So much yuck. But anyhow, yeah, but I think that we'll see more and more touchless options in both wine, beer, and cocktails. I think in all three categories, we'll see more options, whether it is ready to drink canned cocktails offered, which they are being offered now, which is super cool, at restaurants. We have the whole seltzer craze is not going anywhere. So we see more and more seltzers on the market, but I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. And I could add to that. I think, the big trends that I see is, I think from, I'll get into the product, but one thing that what we really did see were the bartenders kind of coming to our homes, right? I mean, the accessibility to people in the industry and the talent in the industry, we've been so spoiled, right? Like we have exposure to some of our master sommeliers and master mixologists where we are just getting knowledge from them left and right, and we learned from them. We learned from our customers that are experts, but the general population never really had that kind of access. Like I know we had friends that would love to take us out to dinner because they felt like they got treated differently because knew everybody at the restaurant. And I think we took advantage of it, but I just love to see that the bartenders and the mixologists and the sommeliers were able to just like, hey, I'll Zoom. They started these virtual tip jars and really taught people how to serve and make cocktails in their home. And now you see like these really spectacular kits that they can order and have somebody really teach them how to make that. So I think that'll continue. And I think that all of our professionals in the industry will find different ways, sources of revenue than just grinding it out at night, right? Because they do have so much to offer. So I think that's a huge trend, and I think that'll continue. And then as far as like product, I think, as Bridget mentioned, like what we call RTD, ready to drink, right? That convenience. People really want something quick. We have a brand, that recently purchased by Beam Suntory, and it's called On the Rocks. So the beautiful cocktails made by a mixologist and Rocco Milano, and what an amazing story there, right? Like he creates his brand and then it gets purchased by Beam Suntory and he's still working for them, but it flew off the charts in COVID, right? So like hotels have it, you just pour it over ice. So I think that'll continue. And one thing that really excites me, yes, the seltzers are big in the beer industry. I'm not going to take anything away from that, but highballs are incredible. So when you get your base spirit, everybody's like vodka soda. Well, make it a vodka highball, right? And with the whiskey, with the Japanese whiskeys, like Toki highballs are incredible. And it's not just like flat club soda poured over your whiskey. I mean, these are machines that create this super, super carbonated water, soda water that just takes you to another level, and then down to the garnishing that makes it incredible. But we've also seen some restaurants bottle them, so you almost get like an old school soda bottle with a cap that you can pop off and get these super refreshing seltzers. Another one that I was just at my son's baseball game, and I'll sneak in a couple beers, don't tell anybody, but
I love that so much.
And you're sitting outside, you're watching the baseball game, and my new friend, the coach's wife, opened up, and I want to make sure I get the name right. Because I had brought beer the day before, so I brought beer again, and she's like, no, I've got some stuff. So she pulled out a couple of ice cold Crafters Union canned wine, but it's in like a full size beer can. It looked like it was sitting in an ice box. It was like, just looked nice and cold. One was a Pinot Grigio and one was a can of Brut Bubbles. I mean, talk about... And it's not like these skinny little cans where you want to sip it. I mean, it was like a big fat can where you just want to open it up and chug it down. So it's like, that's great if you want to go light and have your seltzer. But if you want something heavy and a nice Brut, you can have that too in a can. And I feel like that is a new trend that we never really expected. And if you're outdoors, you want something cold, especially if you're here in Miami.
I love all of that. You're like, this is mama's baseball game now.
Exactly. Yeah. My gosh.
If I have to sit here, we may as well make it fun.
Of course. The dads were all jealous, but they were too busy coaching. So,
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Julie, because I think something like with the canned cocktails and the RTDs that we talked about, the ready to drinks and the Bruts in the can, at one time, it wasn't that long ago, where we looked like at box wine and anything in a can being of lesser value. And that has completely flipped. Yeah. Let me tell you, so many of these ready to drinks we talk about, like On the Rocks, that are made with Knob Creek. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah,
premium stuff. And you see the wines in the can, the Bruts in the can by major labels. It's awesome. It makes it so easy to grab and go on your picnic or to your, in my case, a dance recital, whatever it might be for my daughter, to have that.
I joke it only took the wine industry 100 years to innovate, to actually say, hey, we have wine in cans and it's damn good. I really want that trajectory of innovation to continue to speed up. So I'm going to ask you, the two of you, a few more questions today, and we're going to get into one, which I think is a little bit, tricky for the industry. As we know, those of us who watch what's going on in the wine industry, last November 2020, there was an expose about the sexual harassment that women had faced with the quartermaster sommeliers. Now, for some of us, it wasn't a shock. For those of us who have experienced sexual harassment in the industry, it was not, unfortunately, a shock, but still eye-opening nonetheless. What do you think that needs to happen in order for us to start to eradicate some of these behaviors, as well as move closer to true equity and representation?
I'll start. Yes, it was shocking. And I think, whether you talk about sexual harassment or sexual discrimination or gender discrimination, it's all equally bad, right? And as women, all of us have devoted our life into this industry. We've all experienced different levels of it, right? And I think we've all learned and to just kind of, well, that's just, what happens, right? We all accepted it, we normalized it, and we just knew it was kind of like a fight or flight type of thing. And we're tough, right? Women aren't as weak and timid as people might think. Some people, we're tough, and we can plow through, and we figure out how to survive. And I think women have been doing it for long enough. And one thing that I learned, I took a leadership course through Southern, which was through the Columbia program, Women in Leadership. And we had to do kind of a self-assessment of bold leadership qualities, if you're a bold leader. And there were different pieces to it. And I'm like, yeah, I got this, I got this, I got this. And then they started asking me questions like, do you say something when you know something's wrong? Do you speak up? Do you call people out? Do you tell them your truth? Do you give them your point of view? And my scores were, I couldn't lie, right? This is for myself. And when I got the results, I was high in like self-care and all like the other things, leadership qualities, but where I was low was in courage. And I recognized, and this was like, I think the course was, we had an internal one through our women leadership program, but it was like in February of last year. And I recognized like, oh my God, like and I have, I've experienced whether there was a derogatory statement or a look or an act or whatever that was, whether towards me or somebody else, I've experienced that. And I just kept my mouth shut. Don't bring, awareness to it. You've got to keep your head down, do your job, prove yourself to get to where you need to be. And that really was an awakening moment for me that that's not right. That's being complicit and it doesn't help. And you've got to say something. And, I feel that getting this promotion and being in my role now is, if I don't do it now and do it with like being fully, genuinely, authentically myself, what's the point, right? What's the purpose of what we do? So I guess to answer your question is, this is the time that we all need to speak up and we need to have those conversations, right? And I know I'm not making any excuses, but men are men, women are women. We're all different. I know women that are probably sexually harassing men too, and men that do it and they think that they're flirting and they're not being bad, right? So we have to start by having the conversation and say, wait, you just crossed the line. Don't do that again, And I can guarantee that guy's going to be like, oh crap, that wasn't cool. Okay, we have to teach each other, and we can't let it get to that point. And we need to listen to victims, and we need to believe them, because I don't care what the extremity was. If somebody didn't feel good, they didn't feel good, and that's enough, right? So open, honest conversations is important. My husband just loves it because I love to call him out on every little thing. He's like, what's happened to you? And I'm like, hey, it's all about speaking up, you know, and I think that's important that we all do that.
I really appreciate you bringing that to light and being vulnerable enough to share. Like, you know, we all start in some place, and I think all of us could look back at certain points in our careers and say, well, I should have, but I didn't. And now you're right. Like, here's the time. You know, we're all in positions, regardless of our titles, we're all in positions where we can actually say something and do something. So I really appreciate you bringing that to bear and your vulnerability and saying, hey, like there's, you know, here's where I was and here's where I need the gap of how I need to improve. And I really appreciate that. Bridget, is there anything you want to weigh in on around this?
Yeah, I mean, when that happened with the court, I wasn't surprised at all. It wasn't shocking to me. It wasn't shocking. I know that it's been said again and again, and by so many in our industry, that we need to not only like find a seat at the table, we need to burn the current table completely down and rebuild it. Like, it's not okay yet. There shouldn't be an organization out that uses the word master. You shouldn't be calling somebody master in a program. For many, many years, you know, I was called a master mixologist. I don't care to be called that anymore.
Wow. Can I just stop you for a second?
Very, not okay.
Can I just stop you for a second? Sorry to interrupt. I hadn't even thought about that until you just brought that up. It actually had not registered on my radar that using that terminology
automatically puts you in a submissive position as a woman, if that's what you are calling somebody, whether it be master mixologist or master sommelier. Either way, it's just not something that I'm personally going to participate in so much. I just don't find it okay. So did I find it shocking? No. Do I see that we need to make massive changes? Yes. Am I hopeful? Hell yes. Absolutely I am. But, you know, a lot that needs to be changed is, like Julie's saying, like, use your voice. Me Too absolutely helped us out as women to give us courage to speak out, because so many times we could not, because it would jeopardize our income in a lot of cases. You know, in a workplace, a lot of times if you speak out, the person that maybe has to help to be your advocate or help to clean up whatever issue it is or to make it better is your boss. And a lot of times that boss is a male, at least in our industry, and that makes it very scary to speak to someone that's of the opposite sex, that when you have just been harassed by the opposite sex. And it's not always a safe place to go to HR either. I'm not talking about Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits here. We actually have great open communication, and we do have rules of the road when it comes to this. But I do know that so many have been affected by sexual harassment and don't have that support system within their organization. You know, they don't have that path, a safe path. It's more or less like, no, I can't say anything because my boss is not going to have my back on this. In fact, it's just going to annoy him that he has to now deal with the woman on his team. So much needs to change, right? And that's going back to when I said earlier in this conversation, like, we need to know how to communicate with one another. We need to understand on when I'm speaking to someone that doesn't look like me or from my background, we need to really understand the terminology that we are using, because a lot of it is very offensive. It's not okay, you know? And there's a lot of room for change. There's great opportunity for change here. But I love that we're living in this era that we're changing. It's so awesome.
It is awesome.
It's so amazing.
It is amazing. And that it is amazing that particularly the two of you can also be pioneers and people that people can look up to in terms of following in your footsteps to create the change and to have the conversations. And so again, kudos to the two of you for creating that venue and that vehicle for people to have these conversations that are so, so important. So a couple other quick questions. How do you think brands and organizations can continue to stand up for social change and social justice?
I think brands can continue to do it by really getting out of what's familiar, their comfort zone. And I know it's really easy to do that, right? It's, you look like me, you talk like me, have the same interests of me, I'm just going to gravitate towards you. Or what I would always tell people, especially when you're trying to sell wine, it's not about what you like, it's what about the general population likes. And I used to always say, if I only sold what I like, I'd be broke, right? Because I have a different palate and I like, super tangy Italian wine, and not a lot of people like that. So I think it's really understanding, like, if we are an industry that's consumer driven, look at your consumer base. Don't assume that your consumer is one thing. This is actually something else Chanel thought when she launched her brand, is she just assumed this would be her consumer base because it was what she was familiar with. And then she learned later, once she pulled the data, that actually was not her consumer. So she changed her strategy. So I think understand who your real consumer base is, and not just who you assume it is and want it to be. Talk to different people, like the presidents and people in very high positions, they have advisors for a reason. Different advisors, diverse people, right? Like, look around in your circle. Who's in your circle? Who's in your leadership circle? Do they all look like you? Your CMOs, your brand people, do they all look like you? Do you all kind of talk about the same stuff? Well, you're never going to resonate with the community if you don't get into the community. So I would start there, is really understand, what do people that are different, tell yourself, I'm going to talk to 5 people that I have nothing in common with, or I don't think I have anything in common with, because what you'll learn is, as you talk to people, you actually have a lot of things in common, even though you don't think you do. And then I think that really the expectation is, as these new generations come up, Gen X, Gen Z, I can't keep up with all the alphabet, but everybody wants purpose, right? It's not just about, your bang for your dollar anymore. It's not just, oh, this is the coolest, hippest brand, I'm going to buy it. People want to know, what is one's purpose? What is the story? And if you don't have purpose and story, and you can't resonate with the consumer, you will be obsolete like that. Like a lot of brands, they were the biggest and then they're gone, and it will happen. So I would recommend to brands, get out of your box. Look at, when you have meetings and you have different people presenting and you have these big opportunities, look at the people that are presenting. Are they diverse? Is your leadership diverse? Is your consumer base, or who you're targeting, diverse? And then you'll know what to do. You'll know how to serve those communities. And I don't think it's an option. If you want to stay in the game and you want to be relevant, consumers are demanding it.
That's great. Bridget, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I think that Julie just nailed it on the head. I don't really know what I can add.
I'm getting super worked up.
We're getting all worked up over here. We're giving you our very best.
I love it. This is amazing. This conversation is, so juicy. So are there any up and coming winemakers, distillers, brewers, chefs that you're watching, or brands that you're watching that you're super excited about, that you think that people listening to this and watching this should go out and put their dollars behind?
Julie, why don't you start this one, because of your Clubhouse experience with all the chefs? I think that you could definitely do some great name dropping here, and then I'll follow you up with a couple brands.
Oh, you can just tell me and Bridget have been talking like literally day and night since the pandemic, because she can just read my mind. So obviously I think many of us have recently discovered Clubhouse, where you can just chat and have access to people that you would never have been able to. And I call them my new chef friends, because I've been like really loving jumping on the chef groups and we've got chefs like Chef Stefan and Chef Banks, and they are incredible Haitian American chefs. And they have been really doing incredible culinary work, but also really supporting their community, and like ethnic chefs, you know, that really like bring the best out of ethnic food. So they're both Haitian and two different people in different groups. And I've had the ability to really join some of Chef Banks' groups, and she is just amazing. She's brilliant. She's fun. She's dynamic. And I learn something every time. And she's been doing like a community of chefs over the years. I guess it's through Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, so I only get to connect with her on Clubhouse, but they really work together to learn from each other, share expertise, go out and have dinners and cook for each other. And I think the more as we are foodies and consumers, the more you dive in and learn more about the ethnic communities within wherever you live, because there's different ones depending on when you live. Those are gems, right? Like you don't even have to travel outside of the country, outside of your neighborhood to experience that. And I think that is something so special that's at our fingertips that everybody should be going out and supporting. And then we've got like Chef Stefan that we had the opportunity to meet, and he's going to be one of our future guests. And, you know, he's been a very successful chef, cooking, Haitian cuisine, but he also started a Haitian like wine and spirits festival, like a food and a wine spirits festival in Haiti. And he does this to give, yes, it's incredible. Like, how do we not know about these things, right? And so I think like there's so many people that are doing these things and giving back. And those are, I think, the type of people that you should put your money towards and you should support. As far as like top brands, I'd be remiss not to mention my dear favorite. And I've become a recent bourbon lover, enthusiast, aficionado. And Maker's Mark is dear and true to my heart. Bourbon, it's such a great entry. I don't want to say it's entry level because it is a super premium bourbon, but it's so smooth. It's amazing with cocktails like a Gold Rush, where it's a nice, refreshing, citrusy cocktail for like middle summer Miami, to one of my favorites, like a Manhattan or an old fashioned. And I actually like it with Boulevardier, with Campari and vermouth. So bourbon has been one of the top trends right behind tequila during these times, and people just love it. And it's so versatile. So I would recommend those two. So go check out your ethnic chefs and embrace Maker's Mark bourbon.
I love it. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Bridget, what are your favorites right now?
Right now, I'm going to start off with something that's non-alcoholic, and then I'll go into the spirits. But one of my favorite syrup companies right now is called Simplicity, and it's run by Reve Schneider. Reve has been in the cocktail community for well over a decade. She's local in Chicago, and she distributes her syrups online throughout the country. What makes them special, like beyond the packaging, is incredibly sexy, because I've had her send them to my house before. I've ordered them, and it comes in this beautiful black box. It looks so mysterious when you open it, and all the flavors are so interesting, like smoked salt, for instance, or lavender honey. This very unique, beautiful the packaging is stunning. And then it comes with recipes as well. But what I love so much about it is kind of going back to that touch-free, not fussiness when you want to make a cocktail, especially coming up on summer here, or spring, really. Hopefully it gets over like 45 degrees in my area sometime soon. Is that you can easily add like a beautiful tequila, like a El Tesoro, for instance, like a silver, to any of her syrups, and you have a cocktail. You don't have to run out and buy a lot of ingredients, right? Because it's already done for you, and they're high quality. And I've been enjoying them in my household throughout COVID, whether it's with a nice Sip Smith gin, or like Julie's just said, just a beautiful bourbon, like a Maker's Mark, or even like a Basil Hayden's, to add one of her. And I just was Googling it because I just did try her citrus, which was amazing. She has a spiced apple. Oh, the ginger zest. That's what it was.
Ooh.
So a little bit of this ginger zest syrup that's really organically made, and putting it right into that bourbon. There you have a cocktail. It's not fussy. You don't have to have the term. You have to be a mixologist. You just have to be thirsty. So
I think we've all been thirsty during this time.
Yeah. She does online classes too, but I'm such a big fan of what she's doing. So
that's awesome.
Thank you so much. I think those are great. I mean, it's so great when we get to experience other brands and other people and what they're doing. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you today that I should have, or anything the two of you would like to share with people who are watching this?
I think what I would love to ask anybody that's watching is tune in to Served Up. Listen to our episodes. They are so inspiring. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, despite all the challenges with just all the uprisings over the past couple of years. I think this is the opportunity to really do something. And everybody, the door is open for everybody. Like, go out there and do what you want and own your truth. And I think that that's really the message here.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Like, this is the time. And Julie, you said it, I think a couple of times, is to not be afraid to be authentically yourself. That's the one piece of advice that I've been giving for well over 20 years in my career. I get asked all the time, what's your secret to success, or how do you have such longevity? Because I have always been me. If you met me over 20 years ago, I'm the same person today. I don't try to fit the mold or fit in with the boys or whatever, So I think if you can be authentically yourself, and that's not always easy to do, it's not always easy to do, but if you can give that a try, I think that you'll see that success will come to you.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you to the two of you. And for those of you who are watching, remember, please go out and support Julie and Bridget and tune in to Served Up, the podcast. We thank you again for your time, for your vulnerability, for your honesty. And as we say at Vino Karma, please go out there and continue to create change one sip at a time.